Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Jeep Journals, where today, as I'm recording this, it is Monday, May the 16th, and last night's lunar eclipse was fantastic. The hike up to my campsite, Juniper Canyon, was one of the most grueling hikes ever, mostly because I was trying to carry 3 days worth of water, and even then, that's a rationed value that I came up with. And at the same time, I am so thankful that I have set up my campsite. As I said, I am seated in a rather comfortable seat, and I have plenty of reservoirs of water. Let me show you one. Also, check out my feet. I hope you're able to see some of that. I can't see what it's filming when I'm aiming the mobile device in that direction. So this was challenging physically, and I'm still going to be recovering tomorrow from this walk, mostly because I don't generally carry as much weight as I was carrying. And the good thing is I have a very well made pack for carrying that amount of weight, and so the weight was evenly distributed. I just have a feeling I might be a little bit sore tomorrow from all of that walking, pretty much all uphill. And immediately after I set up, it was pretty hot for a while. And so I thought, what did I just do? And at the same time, while I was sitting here, I thought that this was the perfect time to record a segment about my thoughts that I get to have while I'm in this place alone. I have a guitar with me, by the way. I brought my traveler's guitar, which you'll probably see in one of these segments. And so I carried a lot of luxury conveniences up here, and I'm quite happy to have achieved that because now I'm able to produce the content that I want to produce without any outside influencers. If you watch the entire duration of my lunar eclipse show, which does not have any songs, any kind of soundtrack to it, or maybe I will still put a soundtrack even to that one. At a certain point in the video, where one of the two cars that drove by on that remote desert road passed by, they passed by and honked 3 times quite loudly. I guess there's not really a quiet way to honk if you have a standard horn. They were probably just saying hi, but I could tell that they were saying hello as soon as I heard their car, and they encountered me in the middle of nowhere. Over here where I'm at, I am truly in the middle of nowhere, and I wanted to say that even though this was physically grueling, I've had emotionally grueling challenges in the past, and some of those challenges were, for an example, being struck repeatedly by one of my family members not even 2 years ago. And this individual would later go to burn down their house and was said to have almost been about to burn themselves, set themselves on fire. And that was grueling as well. That took a lot of energy out of me at the end of the day. All of those events that I just referenced, being physically assaulted by this individual, being emotionally tormented by thinking that this family member was going to burn themselves down, and also the physical destruction that they caused to my grandparents' home was quite grueling. I've had a lot of seconds. Some of the seconds include people next to me yelling at me for misunderstandings, not quite understanding whatever we're talking about because they're in a state of agitation. A lot of us are in a state of agitation and we don't know how to properly deal with those emotions because our fathers didn't quite teach us how to reflect on things and how to embrace peace and solitude. And so, quite some time back, I started a website and a kind of a motto, camp in style. And that's my website, campinstyle.com. I have many websites actually, but when I go camping, you know, this tent behind me is a full-size tent. It gives me just as much, if not slightly less room than the back area of my Jeep. And with that room also comes a deficit of room because I typically sleep with my pack inside of the shelter. I don't like to hang it from a tree. There's no telling what kind of values might be added to that pack as the night goes by. In the past, it was common to see scorpions all over this park. I haven't seen as many recently, and today I saw a lot of flowers and a lot of butterflies, and there are definitely a lot of flies. So I hope that I'll hear a lot of bats chittering through the night. If I do, that's great. If not, I'm telling you that I did not hear a lot of bats in the desert last night from the hours of basically pre-sunset all the way till 2 in the morning when I was recording the Eclipse. And while I was out there, I was also making note that there were no foxes yapping, there were no coyotes yipping, there were no howls from any of the hounds, there were definitely no bats, there were no sounds of owls, there were no sounds of howling, there were no mice. A lot of times when you're just parked in the desert, you'll have mice run by. There were no reptiles. There were very few reptiles throughout this park since I've been here that I've actually witnessed. 2 were today on my hike. There was this giant, in the Boot Canyon, there was this giant lizard, one that I've probably never seen before. And I was unable to document it because basically as I was seeing it, it was also crawling into its crevice and disappearing. Sometimes that's how the animals out here are. I'll see something maybe once every 5 years or so, and I can't quite identify it. I'll just have to rely on my memories. And one time I even saw an owl type that the ornithologist of the national park, didn't believe I had seen until I showed him the pictures. And when I showed him the pictures, then he had to take a report immediately because he was so excited that this was an uncommon sighting of a particular owl. Now, back to the subject at hand. Here I am going through a grueling physical challenge. And part of the reason I'm doing that is because many people can't do this. And since people cannot do this regularly, since people can't do this regularly, what I try to do is document everything that I see here. And that used to bring people joy. The more that I talk about the depletion of some of these resources, the more grueling my conversations with you can probably be perceived. But this isn't a grueling conversation. This is a conversation of observational awareness where we observe things and we're aware together of the things that we're witnessing. For an example, I have a great friend who also noticed that they didn't see here in Texas, they didn't see in their region very many of the green anole lizards. I don't know how you say that. Anole lizards, the ones that have the chin pouch that they puff out and change colors. And frankly, they can change colors as well. We didn't have very many of them for the past 2 years. In fact, I would say we had a 0 count of those lizards. And she happened to see one recently, and so I was very happy to hear that she saw that. And at the same time, I saw 2 tarantulas last night, and I was pretty happy to see that type of activity. I know there should be a lot more. I also saw yesterday a cattle egret that looked like it was in some type of distress. It was very confused, and it was by a small puddle of water by a seasonal water pond that's by the main park road. And normally I can find groups of egrets there. I guess it would be a flock of egrets. I don't know what you would call a herd of cattle egrets. I really don't know. What I do know is that some of the conversations I have can seem very grueling because it's challenging to hear that certain things might be on the decline. It's challenging to hear that we might need to maintain control in order to work through this. And some of the work that's required is going to not just be an award for showing up. The beyond showing up, there's also participation. And just as an example, I've mentioned to certain entities that some of the groups that I've participated with recently, including some that are dedicated to reporting on conservation services, like let's say you have a sporting goods store, and their sporting goods store has also offerings to have a guided walk somewhere. I'm just using a sporting goods store as an example. That's not who this tour that I took was with. It's just an example of all the different groups that exist. And let's say that you have this group that exists, and and the group shows up in these wild spaces, and basically everyone brings plastic bottles, one-time use disposable bottles. And in fact, there's pallets of these bottles. The conversation is basically turning into a grueling conversation because, for an example, if I talk about this matter, about convenience-based packaged products with my own father, that's possibly the reason why he would yell at me in the car if we were having a discussion about where to drive to basically purchase some food for the entertainment value scenario that we were participating in. There are a lot of conversations that I've had with people that have gone completely haywire, and I can't quite understand it. And so I come out here to be alone, and it's quite grueling to walk up these mountains alone, but at the same time, it's magnificent. If you could only have seen when the moon went into full eclipse, if you could only have seen the amount of stars, and if you could only have seen the Milky Way shining through the night in the absence of the moon, if you could only have seen the other stars that were traveling in correlation with the moon, the dimmer the moon got, the more I could see the stars around it. If you only could have seen that, then you might have figured out a way to plan an entire event around that. For an example, if I had friends and family who liked to participate in these things, I would probably have brought my friends and or family out here to enjoy these circumstances. We certainly wouldn't have climbed up this mountain unless that's what you were into. And in fact, I do have friends who enjoy staying up in the mountains. Several who I've stayed up in the basin, up in these mountains with, but one in particular I stayed in this exact site. This is a very special site to me. It's quite removed from the main trail loop. In order to get here, you have to go out of your way to get here. And it even says as you go down the spur of this trail, basically the offshoot of the South Rim Trail, it tells you there's no return to the basin via this route. So this basically walks you down into the desert. And I've taken on this trail from the desert with many friends, and I've even taken on this trail with my own, basically with my direct relative. So with all of that in mind, I'm so thankful for my father for showing me this place. It was 1993 when I got to come to Big Bend National Park, and we came back in 1995. And both years I had a camcorder. I was one of the early adapters, and I had some of the highly disposable one-time use items practically. Just to put it into perspective, I have several GoPros that I rarely use. And all of these things, as the lithium batteries die, let's just say for an example with a Fit watch, any of these devices that have these batteries and these technologies that are just going to go defunct, all of these things are one-time use type items. Now, these reusable bladders that I have, I can use them many, many times. And actually, I have used them many, many times in a variety of ways. But transportation of and consumption of water is the primary way that I've enjoyed these bladders. The plastic bottles that one basically would purchase of water, I've enjoyed those many times as well. And it's a very tough conversation when we are actively voting every time we put our dollars into our entertainment values, basically. Some people that I know might be traveling to, for an example, casinos and places of that nature to spend their enjoyment. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just happens to be a little bit defunct, you know. In the world today, while there are haves and have-nots, and while there are people suffering, if we have a lot to gamble with just for the fun of it and not really, you know, as a serious competitive gambler, then we also happen to probably devalue ourselves. And that's with those devaluations, we tend to lash out devaluing other people as well, because, you know, how can someone else have any kind of respect if I myself can't respect myself? You know, how can I respect other people? I can't respect other people if I don't respect myself. And a lot of times the way that people treat us is how we believe that we are supposed to be treated. And so as we allow people to treat us certain ways, that will inevitably become who we become. And so I put a stop to all of that. I put a stop to receiving any kind of negative energy. And I do that by exploring what I call the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. And the spirit of truth is probably so profound that if you had someone working on something, like let's say a cabinet, you know, they're building a cabinet, if they weren't feeling great, the work wouldn't be that great. After this grueling hike, I played my guitar quite a bit here, and it wasn't as efficient, energetic, and lighthearted as it could be, because up on this climb, I also carried all of the grueling past that I've carried with me for so long. Much of it I've already let go. I've spent many hours on the highway, and I've wept out quite a bit of any of the grueling experiences that I've gone through. That doesn't mean that I don't recognize when something can continue to present itself as an uphill challenge. Now, the thing about challenges is that I seem to take them on. You know, I hardly ever take the easy way. The wind is always blowing straight into my face. Sounds like a song, right? It is a song. And all of these things are true. You know, we've all done this. We've all done things the hard way. Otherwise, how else would we not have found ourselves at the junction that we're at right now? Me and Juniper Canyon 1, sharing this video sometime in the future from the past, talking about right now, and you, the viewer sitting where you're sitting, thinking, wow, this guy, he's talking a lot. But how else can I have a conversation when there's no participation with the communicants, with the people who are supposed to be participating? So I come out here to release the feelings of inadequacy. I come out here to experience what it's like to have less. I come out here to see what I can do to make a true impact on these environmental challenges that we're faced with. And when I walked up here, I came up with some mixed nuts, with something like 10 oranges, and actually nectarines, and some tomatoes from my garden, okra from my garden, and a heck of a lot of water. So all of that weighs a lot. It weighs quite a bit, actually. I think I have over 20 pounds in water alone, and I drank a pretty good amount. I drank about what I thought I would on the way up, and I have a bladder out, as you saw earlier, that I'm going to continue to rehydrate from. I'm wondering if I brought enough at all to make it through to the weekend. I wanted to be here a full week, and if I stay put and don't really burn a lot of energy, I think that I can do it. The thing is that it's a different kind of experience to live in solitude with so much less. And so when I come out here to trade something. I basically come out here to, as if I told someone a story. There was a kid that asked me if this was a piece of coral, and it was so from the heart that I had to respond in kind. And so I held this piece of coral out, and I said, yes, it is. And it's actually a piece of coral that I put my hands into the water for, and I asked for something, like I was praying. I asked for something to come to my hands that I could make into a piece of jewelry. And this piece of coral came, and it has one single hole that goes through 2 portions of the fossilized coral. And that single hole, I was only able to pass a copper wire through. I couldn't pass any other wire. I tried gold, I tried silver, but I passed this copper wire through it. And then I used a wire twisting tool to form the part that connects to the bail. So these are things that we can functionally appreciate and recognize as possibilities for making future jewelry, for not sourcing things destructively. However, once again, when it comes to talking with our fathers about these things, it gets kind of a little bit complicated, because we start to think, well, what are we going to do? What are we doing to our jobs sector? What are we doing to our jobs market? But at the same time, we're not even thinking about the resources at all, while we're simultaneously trying to sell them. And these are shortcomings of communication that can only be considered when we're able to consider the truth. And there's a spirit of truth and a spirit of error. And the spirit of error has a very complex time trying to understand what it means to do with less, to take on the challenges, and to have a conversation that is heart to heart. And the spirit of truth is able to do that without any trouble. It's the spirit of truth, That's really all there is to it. You can ask a question, you'll get an answer. And that's basically, even if I don't know the answer, you'll get an answer, but it's not going to be a made up answer. These are the things that we find ourselves missing in this post-corona experience. There's a lack of accountability, and that's so easy to see, because, again, I've had direct family members striking me and lashing out at me and there's no recourse. There's no corrective action at all. Who's the management for that? You know, who's the higher power? Who's the higher authority? Who is the higher authority? Did you like that? It's like I knew where the sun was going to be in the frame. These things that we don't give attention to are sometimes the things that are going wrong. And when things can go wrong and we don't pay attention to them, they can go really wrong. So with all of these things in mind, I climbed up a mountain today, and I was very focused on my climb. I wasn't distracted by anything else. I was able to take my time. I have everything I need and then some. In general, I always travel with a little bit more than I need for some reason. The only thing is that the water weight was so significantly heavy that I sweat a lot coming up, and so I needed to rehydrate quite a bit more than probably normal, even though I started out, with quite a bit of water before I even started this uphill journey. So that's why all my foods are hydrating, except the mixed bag of nuts, the tomatoes, the oranges, all the apple. I had an apple too. These things are hydrating, and so since they're hydrating, that means I don't have to hydrate those things with my water source, which means I'm not losing water by just heating up some kind of food that comes in a package. Packaged deals are sometimes not the best way to consider the future. Package deals of gambling our incomes away are things that maybe we need to consider rolling the dice differently on. Maybe we need to find that freakishly strong person in our network and fund their crazy expeditions. Maybe if you're lucky, maybe I would carry some of these things for you, for the right fee. There's an exchange of energy. And right now, I really don't need much to enjoy my life. I can be here alone or with somebody and be enjoying my life. The thing about it is when we have experiences with one another that make each other think in certain ways, some of us are free because the truth will set you free. And when you're free, you don't dwell on things for too very long. You just kind of move on with the progression. There's a progression to overcoming a mountain, and that progression is usually taking measured steps in a controlled manner so that you don't basically fall off the cliff while you're going uphill with so much weight on your back, so that you don't step awkwardly and fracture your leg, so that you don't make a mistake. And I believe in one of the recent videos, which is not recent anymore, I think it was shown on May 15th. If you backtrack to May 15th's videos, I talked about trail treasures, and it was a video about addiction. And I talked about how if you hold out for longer and longer on certain things, that basically more rewarding things are presented to you. Like even this hat is trail treasure. Excuse me, even this hat is trail treasure, believe it or not. I have a little bit of what feels like a reflux type feeling, and I think it's because I haven't drank enough water yet. So I also can see it looks like my eyes turned a little bit red also. It was quite a walk. I know that at a certain point my eyes were itching, and I think it was from there was a lot of wind on the way up, and there was a lot of dust in the air. Even last night when I was filming the Eclipse, I was bombarded with all kinds of dust. There were probably dust devils traveling throughout the night that would keep slamming me, and it made me sneeze, and my nose was running quite a bit. So these experiences are challenging, and in a way, I'm glad that we've tamed nature to the point where there's no or hardly very many biting insects that are flying around. The only concern I have with that is that that means there are less bats flying around as well. So if the bats are important, for keeping the pests down, well, let me tell you what, the pests absolutely have survived. And so if the bats didn't survive as well, then it's going to be some complex times for us. These are conversations that we can have that tie directly back to trying to figure out a way to offset the opportunity for making the mistake of purchasing the wrong things to begin with in our economy, which is currently challenged. It's going to be a grueling challenge, but the beauty of it is if we're focused on this grueling challenge all together at the same time, it's not really going to be that big of a challenge. We can immediately convert cost associated membership shopping buildings to something that has inventory of all sorts, scannable inventory, and treats all that inventory a just like any other super experienced and quick shipping industry. So all of these things I think are going to still be something that we can work with. All of the stores, are still something we can work with. The only concern that someone like me has is that I've literally been punched because I was happy and I had ideas of inspiration that were related to turning this disaster around. And the funny thing was that the more and the more that we tried to solve any problem together, even finding what store was closer to go and buy some food to take back to the hotel room, that has turned into some kind of a war. So we're all fighting wars right now. It sounds like in the world, and I say it sounds like because it sounds like everyone is pretty focused on their story so much that it's tripping up even the general activities of follow through. And so, in order to follow through with what I want to accomplish, I came out here to be alone and to keep my priorities in order. And the only things that I'm going to be presented here with are reflections of me. So if it's a lot of flies, I guess, maybe I am a reflection. Maybe the flies are a reflection of me. If I saw buzzards circling earlier or a raven, maybe that's a reflection of me. But normally, when I come to these places, I see amazing amounts of wildlife, more than anyone else in general. And today, that giant lizard that I saw, I wish that I could have brought that video clip to you. Maybe I will. On the way down, I kind of know where it's at. Sometimes they just hang out in the same spot over and over. And maybe I'll be able to find it. If I'm able to find it, I'll bring it to you. In the meantime, if I stay put, maybe something will come and visit in person that I can bring to you. I've got a charger for this device. This is the only device. Actually, I brought one other camera, but this is the main device that I've been bringing you all of these video clips with, and I've had all the, even the GoPros, I've had all of these things, and I still have them. I rarely use them, and I wonder how many of us could have, just bought one set and loaned them out to our friends. The only thing is that some people who have any grueling experiences going on sometimes don't tend to the things that you would think they would tend to, like a thing they borrowed from you. And so it may not come back in the same condition. So in many ways, I'm loaning myself out to you. You've been out on loan to me for 34 and a half minutes, and I'm trying to return you in better condition than I borrowed you. And so I hope you're doing the same thing for me. I hope that you're wishing me the best of luck so that I can bring you the wildlife that you're used to seeing from me. And I hope that you understand all of these bits of information and how intertwined they are, like not hanging the backpack on the tree, putting it in my tent because I don't want to pick up like a scorpion or something like that. See, I take all these preventative measures using the bear box for the food and anything that has scents, of course, any kind of smells. Take all these preventative measures, and I recognize I didn't see any bear scat for the whole trail on the way up. I didn't see any bear paw prints, but at the same time, I can only wonder if there are bears up here and if there is a deficiency in the foods that are out here. When do I become a morsel of consideration? So these are things that I wonder, especially having been recently struck repeatedly by a direct family member. These are it's like it's just to me it's just a matter of time. I've had people yelling at me in the very next seat, and while I'm driving, and as if it's not already complex to navigate a machine of that weight in traffic, and I've got to say that some of the things that I've been wronged with, I've simply asked for acknowledgement, not to point out that someone's wrong or bad person or this that or the other, but because there's an energy that's tied to it. And for as long as that person carries that grudge, they've also got a grueling uphill battle themselves. And their grueling battle might not be physical, it might be mental. So we're all going through these different challenges. And since many people can't take on these physical challenges, I go ahead and take these on because I like doing these things. It really makes me feel like I'm in my element, and I can do what many people cannot do in these situations. And so I do validate myself as quite experienced and quite seasoned and actually an expert in these circumstances. And this is not any kind of a self promotion tour. This is just basically me having a conversation with you, showing you some of the things that I'm doing so that you can understand that it took effort to do this. It took effort and it took energy. And that energy you can see on my face, how it affected me. You can see in my aging how some of these things are affecting me. But you can also see as the tables turn how that affects me as well. So that's what this channel's about. And so I'm going to do my best to maintain my cool while I'm here in this super amazing national park system. And I'm going to enjoy the birds the way I've been hearing them. I know something large was moving off in the distance over here in front of me, and maybe I'll see it later. Whatever the case, I'm also going to enjoy seeing this video, seeing this channel, I should say, grow the way that it should have grown, the way that it needed to grow, because it's being nurtured now. And I would like to help nurture other people. And sometimes I think some people are just monetarily in a bind. The only thing is that, again, if we can't free ourselves from that bind, if we can't immediately, like, let's say we owe a certain money and then that money is paid and we can't free ourselves because there's always that other thing to gravitate towards. That's addiction. These are addictions, and some people are able to gamble with that type of situation indefinitely. But the fact is, if we're gambling with how we're treating one another, that's a whole other circumstance, and it might be time for you to go up the mountain and have a conversation. You don't need to come up here for a whole week. You don't have to even go up the mountain, but simply being in the presence of nature, and maybe in the middle of the desert saying a prayer, being humble before that higher power that we all know observes all of the actions that we do, then we can probably have a more harmonious existence. And I would even go so far as to say that if all of this is true, then for some reason that $17,000 guitar that I mentioned having a desire for, I bet you it'll either come down in price or I'll have the ability to immediately pay that amount, because the law of love is that basically, you know, if something's meant to be, it's going to be. And that's really all there is to it. So the more we worry about things, if we're worried about something, walking up the trail, we will trip on the stones, which will cause us the possibility of falling down and scraping our knee, possibly our elbow, maybe getting a fracture. I mean, when's the last time you've fallen on a trail? I know I did it recently, and that was a very interesting situation. I think it was heat related, but I'm not really sure, because when I was walking, it was very similar to something that I've experienced in a dream, which is like suddenly something changed. There was a value that was there that was suddenly different. And so that's why I do my best to prepare for the things that might happen. I try to get everything set up a certain way, and that way I know what's gone into my tent, and what basically what goes in is only what I would have allowed. So if there happens to be something venomous in there, that's so unlikely, because I've done everything I can to make sure that that's not going to occur. Furthermore, while I was here, I was thinking about a circumstance that I had happen when I was camping with a group of friends in the basin. In the basin is where the campgrounds are a little bit closer. It's car camping. You can pull up into a spot and have several tents per site, depending on what site it is. And I had just told all of my friends, zip your tent up if you have the ability. If it has two zippers, zip your tent up to the top of the tent, not just down to the bottom, because apparently the skunks had learned that if they put their nose between the two zippers that come together, and they just kind of, nudge them apart, then they can crawl into the tent. Once they're in the tent, if you happen to have something like your favorite granola bar in your tent, then the skunk suddenly is going to key in on that and take it from you. And in fact, after telling that story and saying, make sure to zip up your zippers, one of the parties that was traveling to meet us in this park did have that happen. They had basically a skunk nudge their zipper apart. I even heard they were yelling, "There's a skunk in my tent!" And then they started. We kindly advised as quickly as possible, don't kick it, so that it wouldn't spray inside their tent. And sure enough, they said, "It's opening my backpack. It's got my granola bar." So anyway, skunks can. These are things that come from experience. If you don't have this experience and you go into a situation like this, and even worse, if you have friends who don't have this experience and you go into this circumstance and you don't warn one another about the potential pitfalls, then you're putting someone at risk of a variety of things that could happen. What if someone didn't yell back, "Don't kick it"? What if someone hadn't told the story in advance, so that someone could be already a little bit more calm about it? These things can lead to everything, including being bitten, by something that comes into your tent. So these are things to be aware of while you're in these areas, and it doesn't have to come from just something with big teeth. It could be something that stings you, a venomous stinger like a scorpion or something like that. And so you don't want to panic. If you get a bee that flies and it's bouncing around under the bill of your hat, you don't want to just start swatting at it, because it's for sure it's going to sting you the moment you almost crush it. But if it's just made a miscalculation, just kind of make sure it doesn't bounce into your eye, and close your mouth. And maybe if you're like, plug your nose if you need to. But the fact is, most of these animals are not going to cause a grueling situation to someone on purpose. They're not going to go and punch you repeatedly, even verbally, while they're sitting next to you. They're not going to do these things to bring you down. They're going to participate the way that they were meant to. And if they make an error, they make an error. Justice is served in the natural way. But human nature lately is that we don't really pay a whole lot of time or value into nature. We put a lot more value into basic entertainment, spinning numbers on a machine, um, flashing lights on a screen. I wonder sometimes if I made these videos with more flashing lights, and if I put just the right sequence of music that was so melodically pleasing, if I would have a whole other audience that I didn't intend to, you know? And again, the purpose of this channel is talking about wellness and conservation. So if you're feeling well, I'm glad. I'm glad that you're listening to this channel to find other ways to pull from that well of wellness. If you're not feeling well, I hope that the soothing conversation with all of the sounds of nature has helped you. I hope that you're able to watch this and be at least pleased that you're sitting on the other side of the screen, because you saw there were a lot of flying insects around here right now. And that could be very bothersome for some people. They might need a spray. They might need to put a spray on because the sun's out. They might need to put a spray on, and even walking without music might be problematic. You know, these are symptoms of potential addiction. So once we recognize that there might be something that we can pay attention to, that could be improved upon, then we will possibly take the next steps. So until next time, thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for picking another video and watching it from this channel. Thank you so much for sharing these insights that you really like. And until next time, peace, love, and all that old school stuff.